Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Two wars and more than 30 conflicts. That's our world today. What can be scarier? The entry of artificial intelligence in the battlefield. Apparently, it's happening as we speak. Israel is said to be using an AI soldier called Lavender. Ukraine is using AI-powered drones. The US is using AI to strike West Asian targets. China's PLA is developing AI capabilities. How advanced are these systems? And what does this mean for the future of war? We'll bring you a special report tonight. Meanwhile, the Western war machine called NATO is celebrating its 75th birthday. We look at the conflicts it entered and what became of those countries. In the US, reports say Donald Trump spoke to Saudi Crown Prince MBS. Why is this significant? In the UK, Rishi Sunak and his Tory party face a spectacular election defeat. Poll after poll says the same. Who is to blame for this? In South America, Venezuela accuses the US of having a secret CIA base in an oil-rich region. In Myanmar, rebels attack the capital as the junta cozies up to China. In India, heat waves threaten to push the country to the limit of human survival. The latest Billionaire list has some interesting trends, including Taylor Swift and Sam Altman. Italy has a goat problem, as in the animal, and they want to give them away. And what is retirement anxiety that has gripped the Gen Z? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Trouble for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Benny Gantz, a member of Netanyahu's war cabinet and chief rival, calls for snap elections in September. The Prime Minister's Likud party rejects the proposal. Opinion polls suggest Gantz would be well ahead of Netanyahu if there were early elections. In India, the Calcutta High Court pulls up Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee over the recent violence in the state. The court says it's 100% the government's responsibility to protect the citizens. Prime Minister Modi also slams the Bengal government, promising to punish the culprits. Somalia expels Ethiopia's ambassador and shuts down 2 consulates. Somalia claims Ethiopia is interfering in its internal affairs. The 2 countries have been at loggerheads after Addis Ababa signed a maritime deal with the breakaway region of Somaliland. Striking doctors in Kenya reject the government's offer. For the last 3 weeks, doctors in the state-run hospitals have been on a strike over pay and working conditions. A labor court has set a 14-day deadline for the dispute to be resolved. The Philippines will hold joint naval drills with the US, Japan and Australia. The 4 countries are deepening their ties. As regional tensions with China escalate, the exercise will be held in the disputed South China Sea on Sunday. And hundreds stranded in Taiwan after Wednesday's massive earthquake. It was the biggest quake to hit the island in 25 years. Engineers begin a massive operation to fix damaged roads and prop up tilting buildings. Wars drive advances in technology. The longer a war drags on, the greater the push for innovative tech to drive results on the battlefield. The First World War gave us tanks, the Second World War, the atomic bomb. Today, the world is witnessing 2 major wars, Israel's war in Gaza and Russia's invasion in Ukraine, and artificial intelligence has entered both these battlefields. AI is being used by the soldiers fighting these wars. Or you could say, AI is the new soldier in these wars. Israel's AI soldier is called Lavender. It's a killing machine. It spits out lists of targets, individuals suspected of terrorism. Lavender creates these lists for the IDF, that is the Israeli Defense Force. According to one report, the IDF used Lavender to make a list, and it did, with some 37,000 Palestinians on it. They were labeled as suspected Hamas militants. So the AI system identified these people for the IDF, and then the soldiers simply went after the people on the list. No questions asked. Typically, in operations like these, militaries take their time. They follow multiple steps before going on a bombing spree, like resorting to human intelligence, a source on the ground who can identify and track a suspect. The next step is to seek solid evidence, clear proof of involvement in terrorist activities. And once they have this proof, ideally from multiple sources, they give orders to neutralize the suspect. But Israel seems to be relying completely on Lavender. It has basically taken over their intelligence gathering process. Once it marks someone as a target, their fate is sealed. There is little human intervention, no verification or scrutiny of the raw intelligence from Lavender, even when the system is known to commit mistakes. Lavender has an error rate of 10%. So, on a list of, say, 100 targets, 10 names could be wrong, meaning innocent people could be branded terrorists and killed because a machine pointed at them. Is the idea of checking these things? Well, it denies using the system altogether. Israel says it is not using AI to lock targets. But another report challenges this claim. It's from December last year. It says Israel's military has an AI unit that runs a secret facility and churns out kill lists like a factory production line. We've not been able to verify either claim. Palestinians, though, have sought international intervention to stop Israel.
Over the past 5 months, Israel has been engaged in the most sustained and intense bombing campaign of a populated area in history in Gaza. More than 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, including over 13,000 children. We need to ask ourselves what led to such a staggering death toll. That Israel's use of artificial intelligence has been central to the execution of its mass killings in Gaza.
This no longer sounds like an experimental project. Militaries the world over, in fact, are turning to AI to get an edge on the battlefield. Ukraine, for example, it is using artificial intelligence, attacking Russian forces using AI-enabled drones. But their capabilities are limited. The tech on these drones can help in navigation and avoid jammers. So the drone can find its way to the target, but it cannot determine who to strike or where. That is still being decided by humans. Ukraine is also using AI to create war plans. It uses a Western software to analyze pictures from satellites, drone footage, and reports from the battlefield. And this software processes data. It helps Ukraine in tracking patterns, and commanders can use these inputs as they weigh their options. But Kiev is not satisfied with this. It is asking for more tech support.
We see that the biggest need is in technologies. We need AI. For instance, the technology for finding targets, just like how the Lancet operates, so that a target can be located under electronic warfare and destroyed. We are currently focused on solving this problem, how to create technology that would allow us to capture the target within a couple of kilometers and, despite electronic warfare, destroy the target with the drone.
So AI in warfare is no longer just a theoretical concept. It is very much part of military planning and, to some extent, real-life missions. Artificial intelligence is fighting wars. You may remember the recent American strikes in West Asia. The US used AI there to find Houthi rocket launchers in Yemen and their ships in the Red Sea. Recent American strikes in Iraq and Syria were also conducted using AI. The technology was used to pinpoint the targets. And they plan to induct more AI-based tools. Reports say the US military has more than 800 active AI projects, more than 800 projects. They're aimed at various aspects of warfare, from data processing to planning weapon resupply routes. And China is not far behind. China's PLA, that is the People's Liberation Army, is building a network of unmanned weapons and sensors. And where do they plan to deploy these? In the waters surrounding China. These weapons will serve as information-gathering tools. And China plans to deploy AI to process this data too, also for electronic warfare. They plan to use it for two things, for the analysis of radio waves and for jamming operations. So it's only a matter of time. America and China, in fact, have the world's biggest militaries and the biggest defense budgets. If they get AI capabilities, others are sure to follow. If they aren't doing that already, that is. The AI arms race is upon us. And to be fair, we are still far away from a Terminator-like situation where killing robots with a mind of their own start fighting wars. But at this rate, the scenario cannot be ruled out. Speaking of wars, one group has made a habit of it, of invading, destroying, and abandoning. I'm talking about NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's a military alliance of 32 nations. 2 of them are in North America, and the rest are in Europe. Today, NATO celebrated its 75th anniversary. There was a big party at the headquarters in Brussels. You had music, toasts, and a cake.
Today we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the strongest, most enduring and most successful alliance in history.
"75 years is a long time. A lot of things have changed in this period. The alliance started off with just 12 members, but today it has 32. So NATO has expanded relentlessly. Eventually, it reached the doorsteps of Russia, and that's when Moscow pushed back. We've seen dozens of NATO operations in the last few decades, some full-scale invasions, some air campaigns, some support missions, some anti-piracy campaigns. No one can question its military strength. NATO has almost 3.5 million soldiers, also more than 5,000 nuclear warheads. The question is, what have they done with all this power? Has NATO created a better world? Let's look at some of their missions. From 1949 to 1991, NATO did not do much. The Cold War was more of a staring contest than actual fighting. But after that, they did a lot. The first ground operation was in Yugoslavia. It was a multi-ethnic state in Central Europe. You had Serbs, Croats, Slovenes, and Albanians. The Serbs targeted the minority Albanians, so NATO got involved. The United Nations Security Council refused to sanction this operation, but NATO did not care. In 1999, they began bombing the Serbs. 78 days of non-stop bombing. And casualties? More than 2,000 civilians killed. Even radio stations and embassies were targeted. NATO left the region in tatters. Today, Yugoslavia does not exist. It has broken up into different countries, and these countries are among the poorest in Europe. That is the legacy of NATO in this region. Now let's look at another operation. NATO went into Afghanistan in 2001. This was after the Al-Qaeda's attack on 9/11. It's the only time when NATO invoked its collective defense clause, Article 5. One member, the United States, was attacked, so all NATO members joined in. From 2003 to 2014, they led a UN-mandated force. It was called ISAF, International Security Assistance Force. This mission ended in 2014. So the next year, NATO launched another one, RSM, Resolute Support Mission. The plan was to train and prepare the Afghan army, but clearly they failed at it. NATO's 20-year war resulted in more than 47,000 deaths. And we're talking only about civilians, 47,000. Many of them were killed by the NATO alliance. Consider the year 2019 when the UN published civilian deaths for that year. People were shocked, because NATO had killed 717 civilians and the Taliban had killed 531. Here's another worrying data point. From 2016 to 2020, the US and NATO went on a bombing spree. These airstrikes killed more than 2,000 civilians, out of which 785 were children. Now, don't get us wrong, going after the Taliban was not a mistake. It was an important strategic and moral goal, but NATO's method was flawed. It punished the Taliban and ordinary Afghans. Also, it's not just the scale of destruction, it's also about the aftermath. Consider the NATO intervention in Libya. In 2011, Libyan dictator Gaddafi was unleashing violence on his people, so NATO decided time to intervene. They dropped more than 9,000 bombs in Libya, and yes, Gaddafi was toppled. But look at the cost. Almost 13 years later, Libya is still at civil war. Almost 40% of the people are living in poverty. Do you see the template here? NATO unilaterally decides which battle to join, bombs the country into oblivion, pats itself on the back, and then leaves. The people in those countries are left to pick up the pieces. It is like a vigilante with a penchant for blood. In fact, you can sum up NATO's methods in one picture. It's a meme on social media nowadays. The caption says, "A city saved by Avengers." But look at what's left of the city, just a smoldering mass. If this is called saving, I think we're better off without the Avengers. And guess who shares our opinion? Donald Trump. He was no fan of the NATO either. But Trump's reasons were quite different. He never got along with his European counterparts. And in contrast, he had great ties in West Asia. especially with the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, aka MBS. Looks like that friendship has grown even outside office. Reports say Trump recently spoke to MBS. We do not know the exact date. We also don't know what they discussed, but the news itself is important. This is the first contact between them since Trump left office, at least the first that we know of. It also comes at a sensitive time. For starters, the US has entered election season. Donald Trump is all set to challenge Joe Biden for the White House. Secondly, West Asia is at war, and Saudi Arabia is a key stakeholder in that war. It's one of the biggest supporters of Palestine. So this phone call at this time is very important. But what could they have discussed? Politics, business, perhaps both? Trump shares a very special relationship with Saudi Arabia. His first presidential trip was to the kingdom. You may remember the pictures. That was in 2017. The next year, MBS visited the United States. He met Donald Trump in the White House. Trump pulled out a chart explaining US military aid to Riyadh. It's as funny as it sounds. Take a look at this.
$3 billion. You look in terms of dollars, $3 billion, $533 million, $525 million. That's peanuts for you.
Only Donald Trump can pull that off. Later that year, Jamal Khashoggi was murdered. He was a dissident Saudi journalist. Multiple reports suggested that MBS ordered the hit. So most Western leaders shunned the crown prince, but Donald Trump did not. And his logic was quite simple. Riyadh keeps oil prices in check, so there is no point taking them on. All of this shows a warm relationship between Trump and MBS, very different from Joe Biden's equation. Biden had promised to make MBS a pariah. He failed to do that as president, even went all the way to Saudi Arabia to meet MBS later and got a cold reception. So it's clear who MBS prefers, Trump, not Biden. Plus, they have a lot of business interests. In 2022, a Saudi developer struck a deal with Trump. They paid the Trump family millions of dollars. In exchange, they could use the Trump branding for their real estate projects. Trump's son-in-law got another deal. That's Jared Kushner. Riyadh's sovereign fund has invested $2 billion in Kushner's firm. This was 6 months after he left the White House. Trump has also backed Saudi Arabia's Live Golf. Many of its tournaments were held at his own courses. So Donald Trump has benefited from this relationship. And what about the Crown Prince? What does he stand to gain? A possible ally in the White House. Trump is leading Biden in most national polls, so it makes sense for MBS to reach out. He's been looking to sign a peace deal with Israel. But for that, he needs American support. First, to end the war in Gaza, and then to guarantee Saudi security. He needs bipartisan support in the United States, so both men have a lot to gain here. But what about the optics? Is it common for presidential candidates to meet or speak with world leaders? Surprisingly, yes, it is. In 2008, Barack Obama met the Prime Minister of Iraq. This was before he won the election. In 2016, Hillary Clinton met Japan's Prime Minister. The same year, Donald Trump met the President of Mexico, again before winning. We had a similar example this year too. Last month, Trump hosted the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban. They even discussed US policy in Ukraine. So such meetings and calls are not unheard of. Yes, they will create certain perceptions, but they also indicate policy. Trump has spoken to Viktor Orban and MBS, two leaders who have a difficult relationship with Joe Biden. It confirms what many people already know. If Trump wins the election, he's hitting U-turn on foreign policy. Our next story is from across the pond, from the UK, where Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is in a bind, and perhaps that is putting it too mildly. Let me rephrase what I just said. Rishi Sunak is facing electoral annihilation. Sunak is staring at the worst election defeat since 1997. That's what the latest opinion polls are saying. A new survey by YouGov paints a grim picture, the worst yet. Sunak's party, the Conservative Party, or the Tories as they're called, are looking at a rout. They are expected to lose 193 parliamentary seats, almost 200 out of their present 348. That isn't just losing the parliamentary majority. We've known for a while that the Tories will lose the next election. That is not news anymore. But this new poll goes beyond that. It says the Tories are going to be decimated. They will have less than half the seats of their principal rivals. That's the UK Labour Party. The Tory loss is Labour's gain. They're predicted to cross 400 seats. Yet another country, 400 seats. Well above the halfway mark of 326. Do you know the last time this happened in the UK? The incumbent getting routed and their rivals winning more than 400 seats. It was all the way back in 1997, when Tony Blair became Prime Minister the first time. Blair's massive victory in 1997 began a 13-year-long period of Labour domination. This year, Rishi Sunak may just see history repeat itself. His party could lose more than half its seats. His cabinet members could get ousted from their constituencies, and he will likely be remembered as one of the most unpopular prime ministers in British history. So, now you can see why he said this yesterday.
But ultimately, look, we've got a long-standing tradition. It's the prime ministers that decide when we're going to call an election, and I haven't decided.
Rishi Sunak knows he will lose. That is not in doubt anymore. He's just trying not to lose by too much. He's trying to undo as much damage as he can in the little time that he has left. Now to the question, does he deserve to be in this situation? Is Sunak really to blame for the predicament that the Tories find themselves in? Well, yes and no. Sunak has to take a part of the responsibility. Of course, he voted to leave the European Union. Then he took on the responsibility of Chancellor of the Exchequer, their finance minister. He chose to take charge of the tottering economy, so he needs to take the blame for not being able to fix it. And he chose to become Prime Minister. He could have stepped aside, let someone else take the fall. But Rishi Sunak wanted the top job, so he gets the blame too. It's part of the job description. But that being said, he isn't the only one at fault. Brexit was not his idea, even if he went along with it. He alone did not cause the economy to implode. That was a joint Tory effort. And Sunak isn't at fault for the latest troubles brought about by the war in Ukraine. He did not cause the inflation and the cost of living crisis. His failure is his inability to clean up the mess. So in many ways, Rishi Sunak is the fall guy, the one left holding the bag for everyone's mistakes. He's the face of the rotten Tory machinery, and he will be remembered for their fall. All Sunak can do now is bide his time and hopefully not add to the mess. If he's lucky, he'll be able to see out the rest of his term. Then maybe retire somewhere quiet or maybe get a lucrative speaking job like his predecessor, Boris Johnson. But so far, Sunak has not been lucky. So his ordeal may not be over. The Tories may still try and remove him from office, bring in a fresh face before the general election. If that happens, tough luck for Rishi Sunak, because he should have known. The Tory PM merry-go-round waits for no one, at least until the opposition puts a stop to it. Now let's turn our attention to South America, where a big claim by Nicolas Maduro has sparked a debate. He's the Venezuelan president, Maduro. He says America's CIA has secret military bases in the region, inside the territory of Essequibo, controlled by Guyana and claimed by Venezuela. This region is rich in oil. It is also disputed. Maduro claims Essequibo belongs to his country, Venezuela. Guyana refutes this claim, and with good reason. They have administered Essequibo for a century now. They say it's theirs. So what is Maduro trying to do by dragging the US into this dispute? He's trying to win some support by highlighting America's history of war over oil. Our next report revisits America's controversial past.
A century-old dispute has flared up in South America again. An oil-rich region is at the heart of it. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro says the Americans have their sights on the disputed region.
Y tenemos información comprobada.
And we have proven information that in the territory of Guyana, temporarily administrated by Guyana, they have installed secret military bases of the Southern Command, military nuclei of the Southern Command, and nuclei of the CIA.
This row is over Essequibo, a territory of Guyana, which Maduro claims belongs to Venezuela. In 2015, major oil deposits were found off Essequibo's shore by a consortium led by ExxonMobil, an American oil giant. Extraction activities started 4 years later in 2019, and they have transformed Guyana, generating some $1 billion a year for the country. But Maduro says this boom is effectively an American takeover, and Guyana's President Irfan Ali is working for American oil interests.
Que es el momento de la ofensiva.
The President and Irfan do not govern Guyana. Guyana is governed by the Southern Command, the CIA, and ExxonMobil, and I am not exaggerating.
Maduro's claims revolve around an office in Guyana. It was set up by the US Defense Department. Reports say this office is for security cooperation, and its staff advise Guyana's defense force. America maintains security ties with Guyana, providing military support and training to the country. Both countries also hold joint military drills together. And that's a problem for Maduro. Last year, he stirred up a storm. Maduro held a referendum, one that ended up reviving Venezuela's claims over Essequibo. For the longest time, Venezuelans have argued that Essequibo was stolen from them over a century ago. The referendum allowed Maduro to revive the claim and begin efforts to seize it. At the time, America stepped in. US forces joined Guyana's defense forces and kick-started training exercises to keep Maduro at bay. The Venezuelan president now is drawing attention to this relationship and using the opportunity to inject fresh momentum into his campaign. America's history in oil-rich regions may add weight to his arguments. Before 2001, Iraq's oil industry was closed and nationalized. But the American invasion paved the way for Western oil companies to enter Iraq. Names like ExxonMobil, Chevron, BP, and Shell established operations in the country and kicked off extraction operations. They remained in Iraq long after the American soldiers were gone. For Iraq, the invasion was a big blow to its economy as well as its financial reserves. Iraq lost around $150 billion worth of oil revenues. The funds were taken out of the country illicitly after the invasion. Maduro is bringing up America's past to make his case, but it remains to be seen if his arguments will find any takers.
What's the most daring strategy in war? It's hard to pick one, but attacking your enemy's capital ranks quite high. It requires a lot of confidence. It also increases the risk of a blowback. But that's what Myanmar's rebels have done. They have targeted the ruling junta's capital. We're talking about this city, Nay Pyi Taw, in central Myanmar. The rebels fired 29 drones at the capital. They targeted multiple strategic assets like the airport, the military airbase, and the army headquarters. The junta says it shot down most of the drones. One of them exploded on a runway. And casualties? The junta says none. But the rebels say multiple. But this attack was not about causing damage, it was about sending a message. Nay Pyi Taw is very important for the junta. It's the army's center of power. It became the capital in 2005 after the junta started ruling. So targeting this city is symbolic. Let me show you some pictures from last week. This was the junta marking Armed Forces Day in Nay Pyi Taw. Hundreds of soldiers marched on the streets, tanks and rockets were on display, but days later the same city is attacked. What does that tell you? That the rebels are making inroads? We are talking about a very diverse coalition. Multiple ethnic armies and groups are part of this coalition. And who is leading them? The NUG, or the National Unity Government. They represent the civilian leadership ousted in 2021. They say 60% of Myanmar is under their control now. If true, that's impressive. Which is why the junta is feeling the pressure. They have now started forced conscription. Basically, mandatory military service. Men aged 18 to 35 must serve in the army, so must women between 18 to 27 years of age. It's become a new flashpoint between the two sides. Reports say the rebels have killed 20 junta officers over this issue for trying to forcibly recruit civilians. All of this indicates that the junta is on the back foot. but that also makes them dangerous. You see, the junta is better equipped than the rebels. Since the coup, they have bought weapons worth $1 billion. We're talking about lethal machinery, like fighter jets and killer drones and rocket launchers, most of it sold by Russia and China. This gives the junta an edge if all-out war breaks out, because the rebels don't have any of this. Most of their drones are commercial ones. They don't strike a target, they simply drop explosives over a region. It's not precise or reliable. So the civil war is poised in a very dangerous position, which is a worry for neighbors, Myanmar's neighbors. What if you bet on the losing side? You could end up being shut out from Myanmar. And that's the worry for India and China. Beijing has put its military on high alert. They're clearly worried about a spillover. In November, they conducted a live fire drill at the Myanmar border. It was the first one since the 2021 coup. Then this week, another drill was held. Both land and air forces were part of this drill. Plus, there was a joint operation. China and the junta together busted a scamming ring. They arrested some 800 people. So Beijing's intentions seem quite clear. They have done a lot to prop up the junta. They won't give up on them so easily. Which brings us to India. What should New Delhi do at this juncture? Well, India has always called for a return to democracy, but the rebels want more. Listen to what the National Unity Government's president is saying, and I'm quoting, "If India wants to put its words into practice and help its neighbor, we would urge it to stop providing any political legitimacy for the illegal junta through bilateral or multilateral engagements. India should end all sales of weapons and related materials to the junta." Is India sending weapons to Myanmar? The government has not said much. But rights groups say yes, India is. Indian state firms have given equipment worth $5 million. That's $5 million in a 6-month period. So India's challenge will be striking a balance between interests and principles. A lot will depend on how things unfold in the battlefield. We'll be tracking this story closely. For our next story, look at the map behind me. It's called a heat map. It uses colors to signify temperatures. A darker red would mean a higher temperature. This is today's heat map. Now look at India. It is dark red in this map, darker than most of the world. Summers are here in India. Temperatures are rising. There are predictions of heat waves. All of this is pushing the country to the limit of human survival. Is there a way out? Will this summer be India's hottest on record, and are we prepared for it? Our next report tells you.
It's that time of the year again. Days are longer, temperatures are higher, mangoes are in season. The Indian summer is here, and it brings with it a stark forecast. It's going to be sweltering. India's meteorological department has sounded the warning. This summer will be hotter, especially between the months of April and June. There will be more heatwave days. Which will be the worst affected areas? It's the central and western peninsula. States like Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Odisha and Andhra Pradesh. So how high will the temperatures be? In some parts of the country, mercury is already touching 38 degrees Celsius. It will soon cross 40 degrees. During heatwave conditions, it will be 4 to 5 degrees above the normal high temperature, which hovers around 45 degrees Celsius. So expect really high temperatures. Some records could also be shattered this year. Then there's the wet bulb reading. It combines air temperature and relative humidity. It provides a more accurate reading of how hot it is. Usually the survivability limit of wet bulb reading is 35 degrees Celsius. A World Bank report says India could be one of the first places where it soars past that. What does that mean for the country? Well, first, the impact. An average of 2 people lost their lives every day during the summer in India from heat waves last year. This year the number could be higher. Then there's the impact on the economy. Longer spells of heat spell doom. It harms crops and vegetables. This will impact production, resulting in higher food prices. Heat waves will also deplete reservoir levels, compounding the water crisis. Plus, power consumption will be ramped up, which means more coal will be needed. All of this impacts the economy. The RBI, that's India's central bank, is set to announce its decision on interest rates. they are likely to remain unchanged. Inflation remains under control for now. But the bank is worried about food supply shocks caused by heat waves, so they are not cutting interest rates just yet. But is there a silver lining? India's rising temperatures are due to the El Nino effect. It's a climate pattern leading to unusual warming of ocean waters. El Nino is behind the heat wave conditions in India. But the good news here is El Nino conditions are weakening. La Nina, an opposing climate pattern, could soon set in by the month of August. That would mean cooling of temperatures and better monsoons for this year. So things could get better, but before that, it will get worse. India goes to polls on April 19th. It continues until June 1st. So people have to go out and vote, and they will have to do it in extreme heat, which means it could be dangerous. Continued exposure to heat could lead to heat stress. It can result in exhaustion, cramps, and even heat strokes. So consume enough fluids, wear light clothes, and try to avoid the sun. Because while you can't beat the heat, you can at least try to keep your cool.
$1 billion. Not long ago, it seemed like an impossible amount of wealth. Before 1913, the world had no billionaires. In 1987, only 2 people were worth more than $10 billion, but that's not the case anymore. This year's billionaires list is out. There's a total of 2,781 people on the list. 2,781 billionaires in 2024. That's 141 more than last year. And there are a few interesting trends here. Trend number 1, the rich are richer than ever. Together, they have a collective wealth of $14.2 trillion. That is more than the GDP of every country except the US and China. There are billionaires, and then there are centi-billionaires, people with more than $100 billion. This list consists of LVMH owner Bernard Arnault. He's the richest person in the world. There are others like Tesla CEO Elon Musk, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, Amazon owner Jeff Bezos, Reliance chairman Mukesh Ambani. There are 14 people with 12-figure fortunes. They make up the elite club of billionaires. Trend number 2. The countries with the most number of billionaires. The US tops the list. It has around 813 billionaires. China comes second with 406. It's a dip from last year. In the third place is India. This year, India has a record 200 billionaires. 25 of them are newcomers. The surge is attributed to the bullish trend of the Indian stock market. Trend number 3, self-made billionaires. There are plenty of them on this list, but none under the age of 30. You see, the average age of a billionaire is 66. The oldest billionaire is 102 years old. So young billionaires are an anomaly, but there are a few of them. All billionaires under the age of 30 have inherited their wealth. It's a first since 2009. But it's not the only first on the list. Women billionaires are on the rise too. That is trend number 4. This list, like I said, has a total of 2,781 people. 369 of them are women. 369 women billionaires. That's 13% of the total list. Plus, this group has a rare subset. Self-made women billionaires. They make up only 3.6% of the list. This year, their numbers reached a record high. There were new additions to the list, including Taylor Swift, the American pop star. She has a net worth of $1.1 billion. Ask anyone and they will tell you 2023 was her year. She achieved mega star status. She dominated headlines. She went on her super hit Eras tour. She made NFL relevant again. She lifted economies, all while jetting around across the globe. She became a billionaire in October last year. This year, she's part of the Forbes list. And this is a unique achievement. Taylor Swift has accomplished something that no other musician has. Her earnings are primarily from her music and performances, not from investments, not from other businesses. This is money that she earned just from her music, which says a lot about her business skills. This year will be more of the same. Taylor Swift has completed the Asia leg of her Eras tour. She will then head to Europe and finally to America. And she's not the only new addition to this list. Another prominent addition is Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, the founder of ChatGPT. But unlike Taylor Swift, it's not been the best year for him. He was ousted from his own company. There was boardroom drama. There was corporate rivalry. But at the end, things worked out for Sam Altman. He was reinstated and now he's entered the list with a net worth of $1 billion. I guess all is well that ends well. It's been an amazing year for the world's rich. 2 wars, multiple conflicts, a volatile financial landscape, rising inflation, a cost of living crisis. None of it mattered for them. Because at the end of the day, the rich only got richer. Our next story is from Italy. It's about Italian goats. And no, this is not a Pirlo versus Totti story. It's about actual goats on a small Italian island, the island of Alicudi. This is an island in the Mediterranean Sea, north of Sicily, part of a bigger chain called the Aeolian Islands. Alicudi itself is one of the smaller ones, home to just about 100 people, and these 100 people are in danger of being overwhelmed by the local goats. But don't worry just yet. The wily islanders have rammed through a novel solution. Here's our report.
There's a tiny island in Italy called Alicudi. It's barely 5 square kilometers large, home to just about 100 people. The island is really the top of an extinct volcano, surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea. But the picturesque scene masks a growing conflict, one that has been shaping up for almost 20 years. So what's happening in this tiny floating seismic rock? It's facing an invasion. It is under attack by goats gone wild. The people of Alicudi are being overwhelmed by the local goat population. Goats outnumber the islanders 6-1, at least. It could be as high as 8-1. There are anywhere between 600 to 800 goats on the island, meaning the 100 or so humans are heavily outnumbered. These aren't great odds. The people are surrounded. The goats are descending upon them, literally. Remember, this is a volcanic island. The goats are actually making their way down from the peak into human civilization. Alicudi isn't big enough for both. The bleating battle is already underway, and we aren't sure who will come out on top. Because here's the catch. The islanders don't want to hurt the goats. Instead of ramming through the resistance, they're planning to nanny the goats instead. Unbelievable. Doesn't that get your goat? How do the humans possibly expect to win? How will they come out of this with morals and not mutton? Apparently, they figured it out. Alicudi's mayor sat down to think, and that's when he hit the nail on the head. Or the goat's head hit him. Either way, goat headbutt jokes aside, Alicudi's mayor decided to donate his prized rams, send them to a willing recipient. Notice that he isn't selling. No, it's a charitable donation, and this has sparked a frenzy. People are lining up to get a goat. One potential adopter is on a neighboring island called Vulcano. The name isn't a coincidence, it's the source of the word volcano. The Vulcano volunteer is a farmer. He wants a number of Alicudi's goats. Don't worry, it won't be a case of from the frying pan to the volcanic fire. It's a dairy farmer that wants the goats, a ricotta cheesemaker to be exact, so the goats of Alicudi will be all right. The islanders are very clear. They don't want to cull the goats, they want to send them to loving, possibly cheesy, homes. It's a novel solution, and Alicudi may actually be winning the great goat game. It's certainly winning over a lot of fans, among both adults and kids.
I have both good and bad news for you. The good news is we are living longer. According to new research, global life expectancy has risen by 6.2 years between 1990 and 2021. The bad news is now you need to save more for all those future retirement years. How much more? Honestly, there's no set number. Study after study gives you a different figure. But for most people, all studies come to one conclusion. No matter how much you're saving, it is not enough. You should be saving much more, especially if you're young, and one vacation or one hospital visit away from financial ruin. Then you should stop spending money on anything right now and save for the future, which is scary and sounds like an impossible ask. No wonder research also shows something else. Worries about retiring are rife the world over, and they extend to a newfound prey, Gen Z. those born between the late 1990s and the early 2010s. The oldest among them have just entered their late 20s, and they're already anxious about their retirement. In fact, Gen Z have a term for such worry. It's called retirement anxiety. No surprises here. This is the same cohort that came up with menu anxiety for when people are confused about their order at a restaurant. Linguistics may be an extreme sport for the young, but that aside, they aren't alone in their worry. Even millennials have retirement anxiety. Look at the US. According to a new survey, the average American adult believes they need $1.46 million to retire comfortably. That's the magic number, more than $1.4 million. But can Americans save this amount before they retire? 55% do not think so. Let alone saving for retirement, 44% American adults do not have $1,000 in savings to pay in case of an emergency. Reports say the US is steadily walking towards a retirement crisis, and they aren't the only ones with retirement anxiety. Now, the magic number for savings differs from country to country. There are several factors at play here, like per capita income, inflation rates, retirement plans, taxes, cost of living, even healthcare infrastructure. What do you get? But across nations, as Gen Z would say, retirement planning doesn't have a good vibe right now. Let's look at India. What will it take to retire comfortably in the world's most populous nation? Apparently 1.3 crore rupees, that is the average. That is close to $156,000. And have people been able to save this kind of money? Not really. According to a survey, 2 in 5 Indian adults are yet to start retirement planning. 61% worry savings will deplete within 10 years. So the growing sentiment is this: we cannot afford to retire. At the same time, the money required is increasing year on year. Take the UK, for example. A single person will need $40,000 a year for a moderate income in retirement. In 2023, this number was about $10,000 lesser. Now look at Canada. They believe they need $1.2 million to retire. 3 years ago, this figure stood at $1 million, so that's a 20% increase. And now 56% Canadians are worried about retirement. So this is a growing trend. And what's behind it? Economic uncertainty, wars, climate change, the pandemic, you name the problem and it has a role to play. So far, so concerning. But the thing is, saving for retirement was never easy. Today, it's the cost of living crisis. 20 years ago, it was a financial crisis. Before that, it was wars or famine. There is always something that will hurt your savings. So retirement anxiety may have a cool name now, but the concept has existed for generations. And here's the thing about anxiety. It grows when you feel that a situation is out of your control. So how can you cope with retirement anxiety? Control what you can, and as much as you can, and perhaps resign to the rest. Map out a strategy. Figure out what you'll be spending when you retire, how much you need to save for it. Psychologically, adjust to not having a steady paycheck. Create your own security blanket, and no matter where you are, which part of the world, or how old you are, do know that now is a good time to save. Also, to all the young and anxious people out there, it is good that you're thinking about your future. It is great that you care enough to worry. But do you know what's even better than that? Planning. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In China, authorities are using explosives on frozen rivers to prevent flooding. In Thailand, a ferry caught fire in the sea, forcing passengers to jump into the water. And in France, President Macron inaugurates a new aquatic center, which will host all Olympic water events. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. He was one of the most prominent leaders in America's civil rights movement. He was in Memphis to support a strike when he was fatally shot. He died within minutes at the age of 39. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
India is less than 3 weeks away from its general election. The political battle is heating up. And at the center of the storm is the strategic island of Katchatheevu. On Sunday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi accused the opposition Congress party of weakening India's unity, integrity and interests. He said the Congress callously gave the island away and that the party should never be trusted. The next day, he also blamed the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam or the DMK party for failing to safeguard the interests of the southern state of Tamil Nadu.
I do not like matters like this pending indefinitely.
Doubling down on the Prime Minister's charge, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said the dispute surrounding the island has been a matter of debate in the Indian Parliament for years. He said India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru himself, wanted to give the island away.
To Pandit Nehru, this was a little island. It had no importance. He saw it as a nuisance. Why are people bringing it up again and again in Parliament? So, for him, the sooner you give it away, the better. Actually, this was not just Pandit Nehru's view. This view continued on to Indira Gandhi ji as well. The Prime Minister is said to have remarked in the AICC meeting that this is a little rock. Whether it was Pandit Nehru or whether it was Indira Gandhi, this very dismissive attitude, this little rock, this small island of no importance, this was the historic Congress attitude towards Katchatheevu.
Both the Congress and the DMK have denied the claims. These claims and counterclaims from the opposition have triggered a fierce debate.
Why did Mrs. Indira Gandhi acknowledge that it belonged to Sri Lanka? Why? Because there were millions of Tamils, actually 6 lakh Tamils, who were suffering in Sri Lanka. They had to come to India as refugees and settle here. As a result of this settlement, 6 lakh Tamils came to India. They have lived in this country for the last 50 years. Their families are here. They enjoy freedom and they are breathing free air with all the human rights which a person should have.
If the BJP thinks that it can derive electoral dividend by raking up that issue, by giving some documents that this secretary opined, this gentleman opined, for all that we know, how can we understand the authenticity of those documents? There is absolutely nothing. The question is this. You say it is the Congress. Yes, the Congress did it. It was an historical wrong. People voted them out of power in 2014. In the last 10 years, you were here in power. What have you done? Why the BJP is evading this question?
Prime Minister Modi's claims followed a right to information report that revealed the decision of the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to hand over the strategic island of Katchatheevu to Sri Lanka in 1974. PM Modi also linked this deal to repeated arrests of Indian fishermen by Sri Lanka. So what is the Katchatheevu island? Why is it strategic? And what is the dispute? Let's dive right in. Katchatheevu, meaning barren island in Tamil, is a 285-acre isle in the Palki Strait between India and Sri Lanka. The small stretch of land was formed by a 14th century volcanic eruption. It's about 30 kilometers northeast of India's Rameshwaram and about 60 kilometers southwest of mainland Sri Lanka's Jaffna. The island has remained uninhabited. It doesn't even have a single drop of drinking water. The only structure on the island is a Catholic church dedicated to Saint Anthony. Pilgrims from both countries visit the island every year at the end of March for service. In the early medieval period, the island was controlled by the Jaffna Kingdom of Sri Lanka. The control was passed to the Raja of Ramnath Zamindari in the 17th century. When the Zamindari system was abolished under the British rule, Katchatheevu became a part of the Madras Presidency. Traditionally, the island was frequented by Indian fishermen who used it as a staging post to dry their nets and their catch. But in 1921, both India and Sri Lanka, at the time British colonies, claimed the island to determine fishing boundaries. This dispute remained unsettled until 1974. The then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi then attempted to settle the maritime dispute. The settlement was called the Indo-Sri Lankan Maritime Agreement. Under this, Indira Gandhi agreed to cede Katchatheevu to Sri Lanka. Why? She thought giving up India's claim on the island would deepen its ties with its southern neighbour. For India, the dispute has not just been an issue of foreign policy, but also a domestic challenge. Over the years, successful Tamil Nadu governments have rejected the 1974 agreement, including the current DMK government. However, in his latest attack, Prime Minister Modi said the DMK and the Congress were both responsible for giving away the island. An RTI reply also revealed that the then Tamil Nadu Chief Minister and DMK patriarch M. Karunanidhi was taken into confidence by Indira Gandhi and had given his nod to the deal. Another reason why the Indira Gandhi government ceded the island was because it thought Katchatheevu had little strategic value. So they didn't even consider ironing out one of the most important aspects, the issue of fishing rights. As per the agreement, Indian fishermen were still allowed to access Katchatheevu, but Sri Lanka interpreted Indian fishermen's rights of access to be limited to rest, drying nets and visiting the Catholic shrine. But control over the strategic piece of land would have expanded India's territorial waters today. It would have given Indian fishermen more area to fish in. Another agreement in 1976 barred either country from fishing in the other's exclusive economic zone. Katchatheevu was at the edge of EEZs of either country, so it retained uncertainty with regards to fishing rights. From 1983 to 2009, Sri Lanka witnessed a bloody civil war. But once that ended, Colombo quickly beefed up its maritime defences, and the focus shifted to Indian fishermen in the region. Till date, the Sri Lankan Navy routinely arrests Indian fishermen. There have also been allegations of torture and death. These incidents have time and again revived the demand for Katchatheevu. Come 2024, the question of who gave up the island is hot again, and the blame game before the 2024 Lok Sabha election has just begun.